pages you did and the video you watched. That's it for this week and next week. That's your homework assignment. So I worked out a roadmap for this that I think will help a little bit. And my intention is to follow the roadmap as much as possible. And the first three items we're going to talk about today are truth, God, and revelation. And then next week we'll finish up with the other parts on the roadmap. We're going to spend a fair amount of time on truth, and there's a reason for that. And I think that will become more apparent as we go a little further into it. And like last week, I think I told you I'm not a particularly spontaneous person, so I had to sit down for a little while and think about what I really wanted to pray for this morning, what my aspirations were for this class. So I composed prayer specifically for this morning, so we're going to begin with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we thank you for bringing us together this morning and for the gift of your presence among us. We come before you with open hearts, seeking to know you more deeply and to understand the faith you have entrusted to your church. Lord, you have not remained distant or hidden from us. Out of your love, you have chosen to reveal yourself, to make known who you are, your plan for us, and the purpose for which you created us. You have spoken to your people throughout history and have revealed the fullness of yourself in your Son, Jesus Christ. Help us to recognize that your revelation is not simply information about you, but an invitation into a relationship with you. Open our minds to understand your word. Open our hearts to receive your truth. Give us the humility to listen, the wisdom to discern, and the courage to follow wherever you lead us. As we learn about sacred scripture and sacred tradition, help us to see how you have faithfully preserved and handed on the truth of the gospel through the church. May we come to appreciate that the faith we are exploring is not merely a collection of teachings, but a response of your people to God, to us. Above all, help us encounter Jesus Christ, not merely as someone we learn about, but as the living Son of God who calls each of us to know him, love him, and follow him. Bless those who are preparing to enter into full communion with the Catholic Church, and bless all who accompany them on this journey. Give each of us the grace to be attentive to your voice and receptive to whatever you wish to reveal to us. We ask this through Christ, our Lord. Amen. Father and Son and Holy Spirit. Amen. Now, the roadmap that I put up there is based on what's called first principle thinking. And that might sound like a lofty thing, but basically, instead of starting out with a conclusion and then defending that conclusion, what I want to do is I want to kind of work from very primitive core elements and progress forward and try to eliminate as many assumptions as I can in the process. And the reason I'm taking this approach is because it reinforces the comments I made last week about nourishing your mind with not only information, but guidance and transformation. So you have to realize that Catholics perceive the world through a particular kind of lens. And we don't just see some things differently, we see everything differently. And so I hope that this lesson will help you begin to understand how the Catholic mind works. Because I don't want to just be dumping information into your brain. I want you to experience thinking like a Catholic rather than just learning what to think, right? I don't want to just pour things in your head. I want you to see how the thought process kind of works, if that makes sense. So the fundamental questions that I'm going to work with this morning are really basic. And the first one we're going to talk about is, what is truth? But we're going to progress into, can we know truth? Can we know God? Why would we need revelation? And then, what is revelation? So this session is really about answering these questions. That's kind of the roadmap. So here's a good question. What is truth? Anybody? What would you say truth is? Okay. Fundamental realities, okay. Honesty, okay. Okay. Those are good answers. So I'm going to give you a real specific answer. Kind of captures what you were saying, but everything else too. Truth is the correspondence between what we say or believe and what is actually the case. Right? For example, if I say that the sky is blue and the sky is actually blue, then that's the truth. If I say the sky is green and the sky is not green, well, that's not the way it is, right? So truth is about correspondence with reality. Has to correspond with reality. Now, I'm going to give you a quotation from Aristotle. And the reason I'm actually going to do this is these questions actually go all the way back before Catholicism, before Protestantism, before the Bible, before the church, or even Christianity, right? So I'm going to give you a quotation from Aristotle, his definition of truth. This is from, about, he lived 385 to 323 BC, so way before Jesus comes along. Here's his definition of truth. This will give you a brain cramp. To say of what is that it is not, or of what is not that it is false. While to say of what is that it is, and of what is not that it is not, is true. Well, that make your head spin, right? I'm going to give you a modern version, a modernized version of what he said. To claim that something is not what it is, or that something is what it is not true. So, if I said, this is not a book, or if I said, this is a tangerine, that's false, right? But if I say, this is a book, and this is not a light bulb, that's true. That's fundamentally what that modernized statement is saying, right? If I say it, not a book, it's not true. If I say it's a tangerine, it's not true. It's not objective reality. But if I say it's a book, that's an objective reality, and if I say it's not a light bulb, that's an objective reality. Now, what word is used when a statement or claim is the opposite of true? Okay. False. False. That's the one I was looking for. You're still right. You're still right. We're going to be a little more precise, okay? So, use the terms true and false. So, false is an adjective that describes something that's not true or accurate. So, if the reality is it's not raining, right? And I say it is raining, in this particular case, it is raining is a false claim, right? So, what is the difference between false and falsehood? Okay, so you're bumping the edge of it. No. Difference between the word false and the word falsehood. So false is an adjective that describes something. Falsehood is a noun, okay? It refers to any statement or claim that does not match reality. This is key. Regardless of whether the speaker knows it is wrong or is trying to trick someone. Okay? It's a kind of a blanket statement. that a claim does not match reality. So it's a catch-all term, regardless of intention. Okay? So what are, let's see, so you have falsehood, right? What are the possible intentions behind a falsehood? Pardon? Okay. Keep going. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. You're bumping against it. You're getting close. Anybody else want to take a stab at it? Okay, so you can have non-malicious and malicious falsehood. Right? So a non-malicious falsehood is just regarded as an honest mistake, right? We all make mistakes. We're not perfect. So we would also use words like error or erroneous. Now, I had something like this happen to me not all that long ago. Deacon Allen wanted to know how many of the student books we had. So I went into the closet there, and I saw the stack, and I started counting them. And I told him, we got 20 of them. Well, then later I found out we didn't have 20 of them. What we had 20 books, but most of those were Spanish. And only a few were English. So we had to order more. Because he was trying to figure out whether we needed to order more. So I gave him erroneous information. It was a falsehood, but it was not intentional. I wasn't trying to, make his life hard or whatever. It was just simply a mistake. Now, non-malicious falsehoods can happen for all kinds of reasons. Mine was carelessness. I should have literally looked them over because I knew we had Spanish and English. I assumed they were all English because we mostly do English classes and we don't have that much demand for Spanish. So I didn't think that were there. But it could be ignorance, just being simply mistaken, confusion, misinformation, carelessness, reliance on untrustworthy sources, or just incorrect reasoning. A lot of different things can happen, right? So the individual may have conveyed false information, but that doesn't necessarily mean they intended to deceive anyone, right? Everybody okay with that? Now, a malicious falsehood is referred to as a deception. That's a deception. It typically involves intentionality, where the individual knowingly leads another to believe something false or misleading. And so the thing about people who use deception, it can backfire on them because they can deceive themselves. They're trying to deceive other people, but oftentimes, in addition to deceiving other people, they deceive themselves. And deceptions fall into some very broad categories. So and these, you can categorize them in a lot of different ways, but this is a kind of a workable one. One would be just simply false information, right? A lie, a fabrication, or a forgery. So you're literally communicating something that's untrue, intentionally, right? Concealed information, withholding something relevant, right? There's an omission there, and it lets people draw the wrong kind of conclusion. And the real common one is the half-truth, right? They give you half of it, but they don't give you the whole thing. Distorted information, right? Altering meaning or context, taking things out of context or whatever. You see a lot of that in the news. Somebody will use an inflammatory title on an article or something. They call it rage baiting. So they misrepresent, they quote, they do quotation mining, they exaggerate things. Manipulated reasoning, causing a false conclusion through equivocation, straw man arguments, false dilemmas, red herrings, all kinds of things like that. And then manipulated perception, causing someone to perceive reality incorrectly. So emotional manipulation, gaslighting. This is where we get the word propaganda, right? So these are all different kinds of deception. Now, the one that I think is perhaps most interesting, it's particularly subtle type of falsehood, and that's the the half-truth. And this is a quote from Oscar Wilde. Beware of the half-truth. You may have gotten hold of the wrong half. Right. So, so now I'd like a little bit of analysis. I'm going to give you 3 sample statements that are truth claims. I want you to pay close attention to them because I'm going to ask you a question about these 3. So here's the first one. Today is Sunday, August 16th, 2026. The next one is, the earth is larger than the moon. And then the last one is, chocolate ice cream tastes better than vanilla ice cream. Now here's my question. Are all 3 statements the same kind of claim? Okay, why not? Pardon? Okay, today's Sunday, that's precise. Okay. The earth is larger than the moon. What's different about chocolate ice cream tastes better than vanilla ice cream? There you go. There you go. Subjective, right? The first 2 were objective reality. The last one was a subjective statement, right? So it was a personal preference, okay? So that's important because there's 2 kinds of truth. There's objective truth and then there's subjective truth. So when we talk about objective truth, we're describing the world as it is, and the truth of those statements does not depend on who's speaking. If a 5-year-old says the earth is larger than the moon, it's just as true if a 5-year-old says it as if a astrophysicist says it. It doesn't matter who says it. If it's true, if it's an objective reality, anybody can say it and it's true, right? So when we talk about objective truth, somebody is telling it like it is. They're a straight shooter, right? Call them a straight shooter. So it accurately describes the world objectively, and so you could basically say objective truth equals objective reality. So examples would be, George Washington was the first U.S. president. That's an objective reality. The lights are on in this room. Objective reality. Pearl Harbor was bombed on December 7th of 1941. Objective reality. Now, subjective truth, it refers to personal convictions, feelings, preferences, right? Opinions. So, and these are statements about the world, and the truth depends on who's doing the speaking, right? So, examples would be, blue is the best color. Well, blue might be the best color for them, but somebody else might think purple's the best color. Right? I said that because I saw your mug. Somebody could say, that movie was boring. Well, it might be boring for that person, but it might be really interesting to somebody else. Or, broccoli tastes good. Okay? Now, these statements are subjectively true, right, without becoming objectively true. Now, I'm going to ask you, raise your hand if you like the taste of broccoli. Okay? So, not everybody raised their hand, right? So, it's true for the people that raise their hand that broccoli tastes good. Now, raise your hand if you don't like the taste of broccoli. Okay? It's true for you that broccoli does not taste good. And there's actually a reason for that. The reason I chose that as an example, one of my sons did a science experiment when he was like in grade school, 6th grade, 7th grade. And he ordered these test papers that people could use to lick, and they were treated so that you could do a survey of the fellow students about whether they like the taste of broccoli or not. And turns out that there's a certain enzyme in the saliva that can cause broccoli to taste very foul to some individuals and it tastes really good to other individuals. And so their experience of broccoli is different. And so that's a subjective truth. Hi.
I need to keep for a second, get in the copy room,
Oh, okay.
and then I'll come back in and introduce myself to the people who don't know me.
The long
I
one.
know.
So broccoli can taste good or not good depending on who you are. And there's nothing wrong or contradictory about that kind of subjective truth, right? Because we're not having a discussion about the nature of broccoli, right? We're talking about our experience of broccoli. That's okay. Let's suppose you were buying a car. When you buy a car, you're looking for a combination of objective realities and subjective realities. You may say, hey, it's got to get 30 miles to the gallon. Otherwise, I'm not even going to consider it, right? It's got to be a mid-size SUV. I don't want a sedan, right? I need an SUV, right? So you would develop a list of must-haves, right? I got to have these, otherwise I'm not buying it. That helps you narrow down the field. And then you start looking at all the ones that meet that criteria, and then you're like, oh, I kind of like leather seats, or I like that color, or I like the tinted windows, or whatever, right? You can look at other aspects of the vehicle and make a subjective decision about other aspects of the vehicle. So you're doing a combination of objective and subjective evaluation before you make your buying decision. That's okay. Nothing wrong with that. Let's suppose you went to the grocery store and you based all your buying decisions on subjective criteria and not objective criteria. What would happen? I have a strong suspicion that you'd come home with a lot of what you want and a lot less of what you need. Right? You might have a lot of chips and cookies and soda and stuff, and you might not have healthy food potentially, right? So here's a pop quiz. You didn't expect a quiz today, did you? Pop quiz. Okay. Here's the question. Is objective truth absolute? Yes. Objective truth. Objective truth. Yes. It's absolute. This is a mouse, for a computer. It's going to be a mouse tomorrow. It'll be a mouse 10 years from now. It may not work 10 years from now, but it'll still be if it was around, it would be a mouse. 100 years from now, it'd be a mouse. 1,000 years from now, it'd be a mouse. Right? That truth, that objective reality doesn't change. Is subjective truth absolute? Not at all. Not at all. Can a majority vote determine objective truth? No. No way. Can't do it. How about subjective truth? Yeah, all day, every day, and twice on Sunday. Can an opinion poll determine objective truth? No. Subjective truth? You bet. Can objective truth change over time? No. It is what it is. And subjective truth changes all the time. So, what is subjectivism? Anybody want to take a stab at subjectivism? It's one of those isms, so that should tell you something. So it's the claim that all knowledge is merely subjective and that no objective truth exists. You have your truth, and I have my truth. But there is no the truth. Here's an example. It's called the subjectivist fallacy. Claims that something is true for some people but not for someone else, when in fact it is objectively true for all as shown by empirical evidence. So if somebody says the earth is a sphere, the other person says, for you it might be a sphere, but for me I believe it's flat, you should respect my preference. As if it were really true. Right? Now, I want to show you a brief video of what happens when people adopt a subjective point of view. Now, this is not Catholic propaganda, okay? But this is very interesting.
There's been a lot of talk about identity lately, but how far does it go? And is it possible to be wrong? We went to the University of Washington to find out.
Are you aware of the debate happening in Washington State around the ability to access bathrooms, locker rooms, spas based on gender identity and gender expression?
I think people should be able to have access to the facility.
I think bathrooms could and potentially should be gender neutral because there doesn't need to be a classification for differences.
I think people definitely should have the ability to go into whichever locker room they want.
I feel like at least public universities should do their best to accommodate for those who do not have a specific gender identity.
You know, whether you identify as male or female and whether your sex at birth is matching to that, you should be able to utilize the resources.
So if I told you that I was a woman, what would your response be?
Good for you. Okay, like, yeah.
Nice to meet you.
I'd be like, what? Really?
I don't have a problem with it.
I'd ask you how you came to that conclusion.
If I told you that I was Chinese, what would your response be?
I mean, I might be a little surprised, but I would say, good for you. Like, yeah, be who you are.
I would maybe think you had some Chinese ancestor.
I would ask you how you similarly came to that conclusion and why you came to that conclusion.
I would have a lot of questions, just because on the outside I would assume that you're a white man.
If I told you that I was 7 years old, what would your response be?
I wouldn't believe that immediately.
I probably wouldn't believe it, but I mean, it wouldn't really bother me that much to go out of my way and tell you, no, you're wrong. I'd just be like, oh, okay, he wants to say he's 7 years old.
If you feel 7 at heart, then then so be it. Yeah, good for you.
So if I wanted to enroll in a first grade class, do you think I should be allowed to?
Probably not, I guess. I mean, unless you haven't completed first grade up to this point and for some reason need to do that now.
If that's where you feel like mentally you should be, then I feel like there are communities that would accept you for that.
I would say so long as you're not hindering society and you're not causing harm to other people, I feel like that should be an okay thing.
If I told you I'm 6 feet 5 inches, what would you say?
That I would question.
Why?
Because you're not. No, I don't think you're 6'5".
If you truly believed you're 6'5", I don't think it's harmful. I think it's fine if you believe that. It doesn't matter to me if you think you're taller than you are.
So you'd be willing to tell me I'm wrong?
I wouldn't tell you you're wrong.
No, but I say that I don't think that you are.
I feel like that's not my place as like another human to say someone is wrong or to draw lines or boundaries.
No, I mean, I wouldn't just go like, oh, you're wrong, like that's wrong to believe in it. Because I mean, again, it doesn't really bother me what you want to think about your height or anything.
So I can be a Chinese woman.
You sure.
But I can't be a 6'5" Chinese woman.
Yes.
If you thoroughly debated me or explained why you felt that you were 6'5", I feel like I would be very open to saying that you were 6'5", or Chinese, or a woman.
It shouldn't be hard to tell a 5'9" white guy that he's not a 6'5" Chinese woman. But clearly it is. Why? What does that say about our culture? And what does that say about our ability to answer the questions that actually are difficult?
Here's my response to all of that. Don't be so open-minded that your brain falls out. So, that one lady, I feel like that's not my place as like another human to say someone is wrong or to draw lines or boundaries. Are you kidding me? Really? Here's a question I wish you would have asked the women. after gym class, can I shower in your locker room alongside you if I identify as a woman? Or if I'm a prisoner, if I'm in prison for robbing a bank, but I identify as an innocent person, should I be released immediately? What if I have a preference not to be incarcerated? What if I'm sincere, you know? What if I have strong convictions that I shouldn't be in jail, right? That's all very subjective. If I robbed a bank, I should be in jail. If you would like to read more about this, you can read Revolt Against Reality by Gary Machuda. I will be sending out a digital copy of that book as part of supplemental information, if you're interested, right? Nothing you have to read. Now, how many of you have watched a documentary called What is a Woman? Okay, some of you have seen it. It's an expanded version of what you just saw. This guy goes around the country, and actually goes over to Africa, asking the question, what is a woman? And it is amazing the number of people who cannot answer that question objectively. He got all kinds of subjective responses to it. I'll send you a link. You're welcome to watch it if you want to. You don't have to, but it's amazing, absolutely amazing. Okay, here's a question for you. Can objective and subjective truth coexist within the church? Okay. I'm hearing 2 yeses. Anybody else? Anybody think no? Not. How about you're not sure? Not sure? Okay. So the answer is yes. The answer is yes. So we actually have to strive to integrate both objective and subjective truths into our life. I mean, we're human beings. We have experiences. We have preferences. Okay? The key is to not allow our personal preferences, right, override objective truth. And there's going to be a tension there, right? But don't allow the subjective to override the objective. Don't make my subjective truth trump objective truth. When we do it right, we end up with unity and diversity. Right? Some people will feel moved or have a preference for doing a particular kind of thing. Somebody might go pray in front of an abortion clinic. Somebody else, that's not their thing. They might write letters to their legislature, right? Somebody else might do pro-life, phone calls or whatever. I mean, so our preferences and experiences and differences can move us to do things differently within the context of a unified agreement on objective realities. And so just read the lives of the saints. They weren't all the same, but they did unite on objective truths. So it's okay, just have to be careful about overriding objective truth. And when we do that, that's what we call sin. We're living irrationally. We're not living the way God created us. We're doing something irrational. What is cognitive bias? Anybody know what cognitive bias is? That's another danger. It's where we look at only a part of objective reality, and we only look at the part that confirms what we believe. Right? We ignore the rest of it because it doesn't agree with what we believe. So we say, well, it doesn't count. But here's the stuff, that it does agree with what I'm thinking. So that's a dangerous place to be. Cognitive bias refers to the inability to think or judge rationally. Individuals create their own subjective reality based on their subjective convictions, feelings, or preferences. As a result, a person's interpretation of reality rather than the objective facts can influence their behavior. Consequently, cognitive biases can lead to distorted perceptions, inaccurate judgments, illogical interpretations, and what is considered irrational behavior. You ever met somebody that seemed to act irrationally? Probably as a result of cognitive bias. So, what do you do to overcome cognitive bias? Intellectual humility. Real open-mindedness, not this fake stuff, like we saw in the video, right? The readiness to listen to new facts and test your current beliefs against different views. Intellectual curiosity, asking deeper questions. Intellectual carefulness, the habit of taking your time to avoid simple reasoning errors and mental shortcuts. We had a lady who came through this program about 3 or 4 years ago. I was so impressed with her. She said, I am very careful what I feed my mind with. Very, very careful. I guard my mind and I do not allow it to be bothered by trash. I keep doing that. That's good. Intellectual tenacity, the inner strength to keep thinking hard even when a problem feels confusing or challenges. So don't give up. So here's a little test for you. I'll put it this way. How many legs does this dog have if we say that the tail is a leg? She's holding up 4 fingers. And for what you're saying, 4? Tail is not a leg, right? Only 4. Good. Objective reality, right? Okay, so we're going to practice, right? So we'll stop and practice. Okay. I'm sitting in a chair. True or false? This is not a laptop computer. False. Okay. We are meeting in the large conference room. True. Yeah. It's bigger than the other one. Yeah. The ceiling lights are on. Okay. It's hot outside. Let's see here. This is not a book. Yeah. We'll get into that. Okay. This is not a book. True. It's not a book. It looks like a book. Now, I did that for a reason, right? Looks can be deceiving, right? How many of you have heard, can you establish the full truth on appearance alone? No. You can't read a book by its cover. Everybody's heard that one, probably, right? Beauty is skin deep. Another one. Things are not always what they seem. The first appearance deceives many. The intelligence of a few perceives what has been carefully hidden. So, give you a couple of examples. Doctor, or is he a gang member? Just the posing for him. If you just went on appearances only, if you saw him in the medical garb, like, oh, he's a doctor. You see him in the other, it looks like he's a member of a gang. I like this one, it's kind of cute. Here's another one. How about the McDonald's Big Mac? The way it's advertised and what you really get. So the point is, right, don't just look at the surface of things. You got to ask more penetrating questions than just what meets the eye, right? Here's a different angle. Can something be true and not true at the same time? Now I'm talking about objective. Objective. Normally, no. So something cannot both be true and not true in the same sense, at the same time, and in the same respect. So in classical logic, this is referred to as the law of non-contradiction. So the door is open and the door is not open cannot both be true if we're talking about the same door at the same time and in the same sense of open. Now, that door there was open at 10:29. It was closed at 11 o'clock, and now it's open again. So the contradictions can disappear when the circumstances or the meaning differ. For example, a person can be both a father and a son. So I'm a father to my children and I'm a son to my parents at the same time. But it's a different relationship. A person can be both a teacher and a student. You may have a professor who teaches math in a university, and they may be taking classes at night to learn another subject. Different circumstance. Something can be both old and new. A house built in 1920 can be old, while the kitchen can be new because it was renovated last year. A person can be both strong and weak. An Olympic weightlifter could be extremely physically strong, but weak in mathematics. Different thing. So apparent contradictions disappear when we specify in what respect the person is strong or weak. So two things are contradictory only when they affirm and deny the same thing at the same time in the same sense and in the same respect. So, yes?
Suppose the example would be, you cannot be a husband and wife at the same time.
Right.
That's impossible.
Not possible, right? So before deciding the two statements contradict each other, ask, are they talking about the same thing in the same sense, at the same time, and in the same respect? That'll help you sort out whether you've got a falsehood or not. Now here's the next question for you. How do accuracy and precision relate to truth? How do those two relate to truth? So accuracy asks, is it true? Precision asks, how specifically does it tell us what is true? Let me give you an example. 2 plus 3 equals 5. True? 2 plus 3 equals a whole number between 4 and 6. Is that true? 2 plus 3 equals a number between 4 and 6. 2 plus 3 is a number greater than 4. 2 plus 3 is a number less than 6. True. 2 plus 3 equals a positive number. That's true. 2 plus 3 is a positive number. 2 plus 3 is a number less than 10. 2 plus 3 is a number less than 100. 2 plus 3 is a non-negative number. So all of those are true statements. But boy, are they, in terms of precision, they're way off. So 2 plus 3 equals 5 has the highest degree of precision, right? 2 plus 3 equals a whole number between 4 and 6 is very high, right? It's implicit that it's 5, whereas the first one is explicit. See the point? And then the others, a number between 4 and 6, that narrows it considerably, but it could be not a whole number, right? So it's still very high compared to a number greater than 4, because it could be 4 plus, right? A number less than 6, still, kind of high. And then a positive number, you're getting into the moderate and low range there. And then a non-negative number, that's about the lowest precision. Okay. So a statement can be completely accurate while being relatively imprecise. A less precise statement isn't necessarily a false statement, and a more precise statement doesn't necessarily contradict the less precise one. But it may simply tell us more about the same reality if it's more precise. How about generalization? How does that relate to truth? A generalization is a statement that draws a broad conclusion from a number of particular observances. So, for example, if I said dogs generally have a good sense of smell, that would be a proper generalization. I'm not saying all dogs have a good sense of smell. I said dogs generally have a good sense of smell. It's a useful generalization. The key word is generally, right? A generalization can therefore be true without being universally true. So here's the question. Are generalizations good or bad? Depends on the generalization. It can be good or bad, right? So proper generalization can be useful and proper in casual conversation. So if I said Walmart is often crowded on Saturday, right? I don't have to tell you how many people are there or anything like that. It's just there'll be a lot of people on Saturday, right? And you probably agree with that generalization. Interstate 20 typically has heavy traffic. Generalization. Okay? Improper generalization makes claims based on very little evidence. Here's an example. My experience with my ex-wife was so bad that I have no intention of ever marrying again. I would not recommend marriage to anyone. So one marriage, one spouse, that's it for marriage, right? Well, that's just one case. Bald men are smart. You see, my brother is bald and a genius. Right? So generalizations can be useful because they help us recognize patterns. It allows us to communicate efficiently, right? If I said it rained hard last night, I'm not bogged down in having to tell you how many inches per hour or something like that, right? It's not necessary to go to that level of detail in casual conversation. It just rained hard, right? And everybody gets it, got an idea. It's okay, I know what a hard rain is, sort of, Generalizations help us make reasonable predictions about things. If we see, if we observe a certain behavior or whatever, then we can say, hey, I've seen enough of this. I expect the same thing to happen again. And they can help us to teach complicated topics. But they can go south on us real quickly because they can be mistaken for absolutes, and they can ignore exceptions, and they can create stereotypes. So the key is watching the clue words in a generalization. If the clue words are often, most, probably, some, rarely, might, many, sometimes, typically, few, probably fairly safe. But if somebody says all, always, never, none, everyone, that's the red flag ought to go up and say, that sounds like an unreasonable generalization. So a statement like, people sometimes lie, is a generalization, and that's reasonable that people sometimes lie. I think most people would agree that that's reasonable and true. People generally prefer pleasure to pain. Again, a generalization, reasonable, but it's kind of qualified, right? People are selfish. That's a very broad generalization, and it's very ambiguous. All people are selfish. That's a universal claim, and that's much stronger and would require some kind of defense before you would believe it. Some people are selfish. Okay, that's a general claim, and it'd probably be easy to demonstrate. No people are selfish. Well, that's a universal negative and easily falsified by one counterexample. Why did I do all this? Why did I go through all of this? Okay, here's why. Truth imposes a claim on the person. What I mean by that is, once you know something to be true, you cannot behave as if it's not true. So, my example where I miscounted the books, as soon as I realized my error, guess what I had to do? Call Deacon Allen and say, Deacon Allen, I messed up. The real truth is we have X number of student books English and X number of student books Spanish. I could not ignore that truth, right? But the flip side is falsehood never imposes a claim on anybody. You're never obligated to follow anything false. Got me? Everybody? Good? Okay. So here's some truth quotes to kind of drive this home. No one in the world can change truth. What we can do and should do is to seek truth and to serve it when we have found it. Truth does not mind being questioned. A lie does not like being challenged. The truth does not change according to our ability to stomach it. Just because we don't like the truth doesn't mean that it's not true. People hate the truth for the sake of whatever it is they love more than the truth. They love truth when it shines warmly on them, and they hate it when it rebukes them. The further a society drifts from truth, the more it will hate those who speak it. The time is coming when men will go mad, and when they see someone who is not mad, they will attack him, saying, "You are not mad. You are not like us." Truth has nothing to do with the number of people it convinces. The truth may hurt for a little while, but a lie hurts forever. I like this one. The truth will set you free, but first it will shatter your illusions. Just remember that it is never the truth that is painful. It's the destruction of the falsehood you have attached to and mistaken for truth. For those new to this, we've been there and we get it. That's why we have confession. I like this one. The 5 types of truth-telling. Tell the truth to yourself about yourself. Tell the truth to yourself about another. Tell the truth about yourself to another. Tell the truth about another to another. Tell the truth to everyone about everything. Live in truth. So, the second step on our little roadmap here is, can we know truth? What do you think? Can we know truth? Yes. How? How do we know truth? How do we get truth? Okay, so experience, right? What else? Sight, sound, taste, touch, right? Through the senses. Testimony of others. Reason, we use our reason. We use all these things, right, to get to truth. This is a mouse. That's a remote control for a TV. That's not a book. Right. This is a piece of paper. Okay. Have any of you personally seen Abraham Lincoln? No. But nonetheless, you know Abraham Lincoln existed, right? How? How do you know Abraham Lincoln? Reliable testimony. Right? Now, all of you think my name is Ed Lucas, right? What proof have I shown you that that's my name? I haven't shown you a birth certificate. I haven't shown you my driver's license, right? So you're accepting my testimony that that's my name. And by the way, it is my name. But that's my name. But you accepted that based on testimony. So here's a question for you. Those are the broad ways, right? Through our senses, through our reasoning capacity, the things we experience, and then the testimony of others. Those are broad categories. I'm not trying to make it sound like that's like the exhaustive list, but that catches a lot of it, right? So here's it. Is it possible that one truth can open the door to discovering another truth? Okay, so for example, right, if we establish that this book exists, right, I can learn the title, right, that's another truth. I can know the publishing company, GIA Publications Incorporated in Chicago. I can get the ISBN number. I can get the copyright date, 1996. I can get the number of pages. I can get, what kind of binding it has. This is, a hardback book, right? So one truth that this is a book, right, leads to other truths. Everybody okay with that? So one truth can lead to another, to another, to another. So here's a question. Now, I would qualify one thing. We may prove that the book exists, but we don't necessarily have not proven that the individual statements within the book are true or false. Right? We just know the book exists. It would require an examination of the contents to determine whether the contents of the book are true or false. But the fact that the book exists is true, right? But the question of the accuracy of the contents is a completely different question than the existence of the book or the number of pages or the title or the publisher, right? A lot of different attributes that a book has, content being one of them. Now, can we know things we cannot see? Yes. What are some examples? Okay. Oxygen. Okay. Gravity. Can you see gravity? How big is it? How much does it weigh? No, gravity. How much does gravity weigh?
Gravity?
Yeah, how much does it weigh?
Gravity only uses enough force to pull down whatever it's pulling down.
No, I'm asking you how much gravity itself weighs. How long is magnetism? How high is it? What color is it? You can't see magnetism. You can't see gravity. You can see the effects, right? For sure you can see the effects. Radio waves, can you see them? How about thoughts? You can see heat waves, yeah. But how about thoughts? How much do they weigh? What color are they? justice, love. So all kinds of things we believe that we can't see. We can see the effects, but we can't see the thing itself. Now that doesn't mean invisible things are automatically real, right? But just because something isn't observed doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Right? So, next question. Can we know God? Well, Catholicism does not teach that believing in God requires that we abandon our reason. As a matter of fact, it's quite the opposite. So I'm going to quote just two verses out of the New Testament, Romans chapter 1, verses 19 and 20. This is St. Paul. He's having a go with the idolaters of his time. And he says, "For what can be known about God is evident to them because God made it evident to them. Ever since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes of eternal power and divinity have been able to be understood and perceived in what he has made. As a result, they have no excuse." And what he's talking about there is that we can look at the created world and begin to know something about God. And what's interesting is that the Catholic Church believes that creation provides rational evidence pointing to a creator. Now, you cannot prove God through scientific experiment because scientific experiments are concerned with weight and height and mass and all that kind of stuff. Well, God's a pure spirit. There is no way you can put God under a microscope. So you can't prove God scientifically, but you can prove God's existence through reason. And probably, I'll send you a link to it. It's a website, 20 proofs for God. They're all logical proofs from reason. And one of the simplest ones to understand is the principle of contingency. My life is contingent on my parents. Their life was contingent on their parents. Their life was contingent on their parents. You can't go through an infinite regress and somehow arrive at, Ed. A tree is contingent on a seed and soil and water. Everything is contingent on something else. The one thing that is not contingent is the non-contingent being that we call God. God is not contingent on anything. Now, I don't intend for this to be a cosmology class, but and I don't know that I really need to convince anybody in this room that God exists. I think all of you believe God exists. I don't think we have any atheists in the room. But anyway, what's interesting is the modern mind tends to compartmentalize our natural world into these, groups like geology and sociology and, biology and whatnot. And the Catholic mind would look at that and say, the subject is God, and we do it in all these different ways. If you're studying biology or geology or astronomy, you're actually studying God. So, Catholics embrace faith and reason. And I'll send you a brief video. It's about 10 minutes long. Bishop Robert Barron, I think it was Father Robert Barron at the time that he did the video, he gives an explanation of the interplay between faith and reason. And the point he is trying to make is that if your faith is lower than reason, if you're abandoning your reason, then what you're actually adopting is superstition. And we don't want to do that. So if somebody said, find a penny, pick it up, all the day you'll have good luck, that's a superstition. Black cats crossing your path, right? Rabbit's foot will give you good luck. finding a horseshoe, Friday the 13th, don't open an umbrella inside, crossing your fingers, making a wish on a wishbone, knocking on wood, step on a crack, break your mother's back. All these things are superstitious expressions that don't express reality. That's superstition. That's abandoning reason and giving faith to, incredulity. Right? Catholic understanding of faith is we take our reason to its limit, and then from there, on the far side of reason, that's when we've done everything we can do within our human capacity to surrender to realities that we can't even fathom. So it's what's called supra-rational, meaning it's above reason, not below reason. And I like the way that Pope John Paul II put it. He said, faith and reason are like two wings on which human spirit rises to the contemplation of truth. And God has placed in the human heart a desire to know the truth, in a word, to know himself, so that by knowing and loving God, men and women may also come to the fullness of truth about themselves. Now, when Catholics talk about faith, we think about it in terms of like a microscope or a telescope or binoculars. Faith allows you to see something a little bit beyond your reason, right? Just like these devices will let you see things beyond the capability of the human eye. It takes you a little further. Right? Now, there are some counter philosophies that we run across that the Catholic Church rejects. And the first one is called rationalism. Rationalism designates a mode of thought in which human reason holds the place of supreme criterion of truth. In other words, human reason is it. Nothing beyond that. If I can't reason it, through human reason, I will not believe it. Then you have the inverse. You have the opposite. You have fideism. Fideism maintains that faith is independent of reason, that reason and faith are hostile to each other, and that faith is superior at arriving at particular truths. It also argues that human reason is corrupt and cannot be trusted to pursue truth. So you'll see slogans like, reason is the greatest enemy that faith has. That is not the way the Catholic mind thinks. So if you look at the big picture, right, rationalism says reason is it, no faith. Fideism says no reason, faith only. Catholic Church says full throttle reason, full throttle both. Two lungs. So in Catholic faith, faith and reason cooperate. Faith doesn't begin where reason becomes irrational. Faith goes beyond what reason alone can discover. So, next question on our roadmap. Why would we need revelation? If reason can tell us something about God, why would we need revelation? I'm going to give you an analogy. I've been a member of this parish since 2014, and many people know me through my actions. So their observations and reason can reveal a lot, and they can learn a lot about me. Here's the question. Can you really learn everything about me that way? No. I've known Suzanne, how many years now? Long time. But there's a lot of things you don't know about me. A lot of things I don't know about you. How would I know, right? You'd have to tell me. I'd have to tell you. We'd have to reveal ourselves further than our observations. Deacon Ellen, I've known you since 2014. You called me the day after I filled out registration form. He did. I filled it out. Many ministries that are interested in reveal, that's where we get the word reveal, uncover, foreshadow, prophesy, proclamation, unveil. My favorite is unveil. I like all of those, but I like unveil, right? And the reason I like it is because just the concept of unveiling, right? So like you pull back the veil, you know, the groom pulls back the veil to see the bride. Or you have William and Harry unveiling the statue of Princess Diane. Or they unveiled the new Gee Whiz Bang car at the car show, right? In each case, the unveiling allows you to see something that was previously hidden. That's why I like it. That's why I like that image, unveiling. So that's a real strong image for me of what revelation is. So the Catholic Church recognizes that there's two types of revelation. There's general revelation and divine revelation. So general revelation is what we call natural or indirect. That's all the stuff we can figure out through our reason and observation and, you know, so forth and so on, right? That's general revelation. And there's a lot of stuff we can learn. Divine revelation is direct, supernatural. That's a whole different animal. So, but they come from a single source. They come from God. Both come from God. One's indirect, the other one's more direct. Now here's a question for you. Think about this. Is it possible that there could be a contradiction between what we learn through general revelation and what we learn through divine revelation? Is it possible? So I'm hearing a yes. Can there be a contradiction between what we learn through general revelation and divine revelation? You're saying yes? No, it's not possible. They come from one source. Come from God. The source of all truth. If we see, the church teaches that if we see an apparent contradiction, it's because our reasoning is flawed, or we're not understanding the direct revelation, but something's gone wonky in our thinking. Because if God reveals something through general revelation or divine revelation, it will match. And if it doesn't, we need to do some more homework. Make sense? Now, the Catholic Church gives a preferential assent to divine revelation over general revelation because our limited human reason can easily get us off track. So we align our understanding of general revelation with divine revelation and not the other way around. And divine revelation provides a distinct advantage over general revelation because it's direct. God directly communicating to us as opposed to us going through the back door, so to speak. So divine revelation is preferential. But if we sense a contradiction between the two, then our thinking has got to be adjusted to harmonize the two. So what I hope you will understand is that revelation is it's not just merely information. It's not like God is giving us like a theological textbook. God is giving himself to us, his identity, his purposes, his covenants, his plan for us, his plan for salvation. He's given us a lot. He's trying to help us. He's not out to get us. So, how does this happen, though? How does God reveal himself? Well, take this from the letter of Hebrews in the New Testament. I think it says it very succinctly. Hebrews chapter 1, verse 1 and 2. In times past, God spoke in partial and various ways to our ancestors through the prophets. In these last days, he spoke to us through a Son, whom he made heir of all things and through whom he created the universe. So, God has spoken to us through creation, through the people of Israel, through his covenants, through the prophets, and ultimately in Jesus Christ. So as Christians, we believe that God has communicated knowledge of himself to mankind, a self-communication realized by his actions and words over time, most fully by his sending us his divine Son, Jesus. And that's actually where we stopped this week. It's 11:54. But I have a couple of final thoughts. One of them is that I hope you can see that truth is real. It's a real thing. That we can know truth. And that our human reason can know something about God. And that God has revealed himself in ways human reason could not discover on their own. So next week, we'll ask the next question. If God has revealed himself, especially through Jesus Christ, how does that revelation reach us today? And I'm going to close with one last quote, and I think this is an important one. For where I found truth, there found I my God, the truth itself, which since I learnt, I have not forgotten. See, I've got a younger brother who's first said he was an atheist. And one day I asked him, I said, well, Joe, I said, I got a question for you. I've got a couple questions for you. I said, do you believe in love? And he said, yes. Okay. I said, do you believe in beauty? He goes, yeah, I believe in beauty. I said, do you believe in truth? He said, yeah, I believe in truth. I said, well, then you are not an atheist. And he goes, why? And I said, you just said you believed in God. God is truth, beauty, and goodness. So when you learn truth, if you accept truth, you're accepting God. Anybody who is, even an atheist who believes something that's true, objectively true, they unwittingly are believing in God. From our point of view, right? Because God is truth. So that's why, St. Augustine was a pretty wayward fellow. He was a very, let's say wayward fellow. But he found his way. And he said, when I found truth, there is where I found my God. God and truth, same thing. So the reason I spent so much time on truth this morning is because it matters. Don't ever give up on truth. Because your pursuit of truth means you're pursuing God. Anybody got questions? Do you think you got something out of today? Did you learn anything? Give you a different perspective? Something to think about? Remember I talked about the pebbles in your shoe, right? Is anything bothering you a little bit? Like, oh, I don't know, boy, I tell you, I wasn't so sure about that. Everybody okay? Did I say anything that just like, whoa, threw you back on your heels? Okay. All right, well, next week we're going to finish out what we're doing, and we're going to dive into a little more deeply into what we're talking about. This is just kind of a primer to kind of get your mind around some things. Deacon Allen, can I ask you to, well, you're going to introduce yourself, I guess, and then if you would give us a final blessing before we leave, that would be appreciated.
First, I'm so thrilled to have Ed accept in 2014